Hello, and welcome to My Nerd World, a Star Wars podcast. I'm your host this week, Jon Justice. Can you imagine if I did the whole show like an NPR voice? How just utterly annoying that would be? That would be atrocious. Welcome to the show this week. Rian Johnson talked about Star Wars into a microphone. Thanks for listening. That's all you have to say. Rian Johnson talked about Star Wars into a microphone and roll credits. I have the audio for you. He was at CinemaCon in Las Vegas this week promoting his next film, Knives Out. I will share my thoughts with you. I will share less the thoughts of Twitter and Reddit because this is one of those moments where Twitter and Reddit are super dumb. It is Celebration Week for all intents and purposes. I'll give you an idea of the plans that I have for Celebration Week. I'm not going, sadly. However, I'm kind of glad that I'm not, and I will explain why. Watched Return of the Jedi last night. I have some thoughts, especially how it compares to The Force Awakens and what it might mean for Episode 9. A few leaky items, nothing major, just some stuff kind of swirling around, still spinning off of that leaked poster that we spent the past couple of weeks talking about. I want to talk about all three trilogies briefly, dovetailing off the conversation of Solo and the vibe of Solo from last week's show. Plus, as always, we've got a ton of listener feedback, and if you haven't picked up my science fiction space opera book, Embark, I think I might just be giving one away. I will tell you how later on in the podcast. In the meantime, let's go ahead and get to it.
Nothing will stand in our way.
I find your lack of faith disturbing.
I will finish what you started.
Who are you? I'm no one.
There are stories about what happened.
It's true. All of it.
The Force. It's calling to you.
My Nerd World.
Just let it in.
Right up top, I want to thank everybody who takes time out of their day to listen to My Nerd World, the Star Wars podcast, and my ramblings every single week. I can't tell you how much I appreciate it. The podcast has grown significantly in the past year and really has become everything that I was praying that it would end up becoming. And it's only because you guys listen every week. You email me every single week, and I can't tell you how much I just absolutely appreciate it. I've got a couple of unsigned paperbacks of my science fiction book, Embark. And I think between this week and next week, I'm going to give those away, and I'll make it super easy. I will tell you how, of course, the book's available at Amazon. We'll save all that for the end of the show this week. We're counting down to Celebration, and it's a little, frustrating is not the right word. As somebody that likes to consume Star Wars content, whether it's the movies, right? It's a given, all the straight up Star Wars content. But I like to listen to other people's commentary. I listen to a ton of other podcasts, and it's a little bit of a bummer right now because everybody is so focused on Celebration, justifiably so. But if you're not going like me, which is really a bummer because it's in Chicago, which is only like a 6-hour drive from where I am, but I just couldn't swing it. There's a part of me that's kind of glad because I want to be able, there's things that I want to be able to do that I wouldn't necessarily be able to do if I were going. And the job just wasn't permitting for me to go and do it this year. Okay, so I'll tell you what my plans are. But a bunch of the shows that I am used to listening to, a lot of them are really focused on Celebration and less about the content of Star Wars, which is fine. It's interesting to see people sort of game out their Celebration. But I'm here to, hopefully, with my Nerd World, fill in that content and commentary gap that you're going to get this week. As I would imagine anything, we're not going to get anything official, right? Between now and, we're getting nothing official between now and Friday. There's absolutely no doubt about that whatsoever. I imagine there might be some leaked stuff this week that comes out, especially since I am still shocked that the title hasn't leaked. Assuming they're going to have merchandise available at Celebration to sell, I'm shocked that it hasn't leaked yet, and I think there's still a possibility that the title could leak between now and Friday. If not, man, hat tip to Lucasfilm and J.J. Abrams for keeping it under wraps. So once we get past some of the content for the show this week, and before listener feedback, I'll let you know what my plans are for the podcast, because I'm going to do something a little bit different this week coming up, and it really is based off of what I want. Okay? So I thought, well, you know what? I will give you what I would want in terms of content surrounding Celebration. I'll break all that down again coming up later in the show before we get into the listener feedback this week. So let's go ahead and start. Let's start here.
This is not going to go the way you think.
I am going to do my best to not focus on the nonsense. I want to talk about it just a little bit, because I actually do want to get into what Rian Johnson had to say here and offer my personal perspective based off of my own experience creating content, my own experience in entertainment, having been in radio in numerous capacities now for over 24 years, and really paying closer attention to a lot of the workings of how studios work, more so than I should have. There's quite a bit to take away from what Rian Johnson had to say. But CinemaCon was going on in Las Vegas this week. The opportunity, obviously, for the studios to showcase what they have coming up, to hopefully get theater chains excited for the rest of the year and the movies that are coming out. There was, I guess, 5 seconds of Episode 9 shown, and it was Rey, Chewbacca, Finn, and Poe in the cockpit of the Millennium Falcon. And that was it. It was like, I mean, it wasn't even 5 seconds, I don't think. I think it was like, I think somebody said actually half a second. It was just like a quick shot of Finn and Poe coming into the cockpit. I will add this, and I know this is a stretch. I will say this, that of the footage that has been shown, that's the one thing that has been shown every time, as far as I know, is Rey and the Falcon with Chewbacca, Poe, and Finn. I find that potentially relevant, especially watching Return of the Jedi last night. And again, I'm really reading into this, okay? I'm really like putting my own perception on this. However, I do want to add a little bit of credibility to what I'm about to say, because we do know that for the Force Awakens and for The Last Jedi, if you go back, and I did, if you go back and watch the behind the scenes videos and the trailers too, they are they're very deliberate in what they show, and you can get you look at the marketing for those films, and if you really examine it, it seems clear to me. Right, and again, this could just be perception. This could just be me projecting my opinion onto what it is that I'm watching and seeing. But it does seem clear to me that there is a very definitive agenda in mind. Tone, imagery, what they want to focus on. And watching Return of the Jedi last night, and I remember as a kid going to the library and looking in the magazine and seeing my first images for Return of the Jedi as essentially a child back in 1980. I would have been, I guess, almost 10 years old at that point in time. Still can remember the library. I couldn't tell you anything about that year, but I can still remember my mom taking me to that library and sitting down in that tiny chair and opening up that magazine and seeing Death Star 2 and thinking that it was the first Death Star half blown up. I didn't realize it was under construction. And there was an image of Luke sitting on the ground next to Yoda, and it looked like his hand was gone. This is before I knew what happened in the film. I still remember all this. It's amazing just how ingrained my mind has been, what's been burned into my brain because of Star Wars, even at age 10 years old. I couldn't tell you hardly anything, but I remember that specifically. Okay, in that magazine was a shot of our heroes, Han, Luke, Leia, and Chewbacca, inside the shuttle Tidarian. And I'll never forget, because it's in the opening shot of the movie when the shuttle is heading towards Death Star 2, and then you see it later on when they all leave to go to Endor. But inside that shuttle, there's this, the only way I can describe it, it's a blue sort of upside down triangle. It looks like what we use now to signify Wi-Fi, where the waves radiate up, but it's blue in the background. That is so specific to Star Wars to me, to the point where when I see, like, I'm looking at it right now on my MacBook, I'm looking at the Wi-Fi symbol, and it reminds me of that lit up panel inside the shuttle Tidarian. Okay, so anyway, let me get back to the point I was trying to make. I think that imagery, they're looking for some iconic imagery, and having Poe, Finn, Rey, and Chewbacca in the cockpit of the Millennium Falcon, I'm going to go out on a not so, far limb, it's really sturdy, and say that that's going to be some imagery that they are going to be focusing on quite a bit. Okay, and we'll get into a little bit more of this when we talk Return of the Jedi here in a moment, and some similarities, at least in terms of vibe and feel, which kind of got me in the idea of talking about the 3 prequel trilogies and sharing my own opinion of the vibe of the 3 prequel trilogies, and how the vibe of the sequel trilogy, or the 3 trilogies, and how the vibe of the sequel trilogy, to me, really does continue to point towards Bendemption and the potential for Reylo, even though I'm of the opinion Reylo's already happened, and Reylo is also somewhat defined largely by the individual themselves and what they define as Reylo. Okay, so let me get back to Rian Johnson. Okay. All right, so Rian Johnson at CinemaCon, they showed that little bit of footage, but Rian Johnson was there promoting Knives Out, which comes out in November, I believe. MTV News caught him outside and did a little Q&A, and I have it's a minute 37 here that I'll share with you and I'll comment on. I want to mention too that Rian Johnson repeated his comments about Star Wars on the stage without being questioned, and we'll talk about that as well, because I believe that carries quite a bit more significance than even the comments that you're going to hear right now. So here's Rian Johnson being interviewed by MTV News. Who knew that was just a thing? Or who knew that was still a thing? That MTV News was they still around, right? It's pretty rad if they are. See, rad, I'm bringing it back.
How in the loop are you on what JJ's cooked up for Episode 9? Like, have you seen cuts or seen a script, or are you just totally out of the loop?
No, I've had a couple conversations with him, but I've actually really enjoyed kind of sitting back, waiting to get my popcorn opening day and see how the thing turns out. I cannot wait.
Now, if he retcons the lineage of Rey's parents, would that bother you at all, or whatever he wants to do is fine by you?
Yeah, I like I said, man, I want to let go of all my expectations. I want to sit back. I want to be entertained. I want to be surprised. I want to be thrilled. I want him to do stuff that I wasn't expecting him to do and just go along for the ride. For me, that's why I go to the movies,
And are you still working on your own Star Wars project? Where does that stand?
Yeah. Still working on it. Yeah. I'm excited about it.
Any timeline? Have you submitted any story, script, anything?
No, we're just working ahead on it, and they're figuring out slate-wise how it's all going to lay out, and they're working that out, but I'm just chugging away on it. I can't wait to get back into it.
I'm just curious, again, from a fan perspective, there's talk of Benioff and Weiss doing something. There are rumors of Knights of the Old Republic. There's the Obi-Wan spinoff, etc. Just as a fan, what would you be most excited to see?
I'm psyched about all of it, but for me, I'm friends with Dan and David, and for example, to see two people like them just be given the reins to go out and show us what Star Wars is to them, you know what I mean? And I don't know, I'm also psyched about the things that are going to explore beyond what we've seen already. To me, that's kind of the most exciting stuff, is pushing the limits of seeing stuff that we haven't seen before in Star Wars, so it's exciting.
Okay, so if you're not on Twitter already, don't go there. If you don't go to Reddit leaks already or speculation, don't go there. I'm saying that as somebody that does. I love Twitter. Twitter's, right, it's a love-hate relationship with Twitter. Holy cow. But it is incredible the amount of controversy that was spawned by that minute and 30 seconds of Rian Johnson talking. Oh my gosh. And look, for me, it is, and this is going to sound harsh, but for me, it's intellectually dishonest to go and jump to huge conclusions based off of what Rian Johnson said there without the proper context. Again, let me state that Frosty Weintraub on Collider said that during the Knives Out panel, Rian Johnson was out on stage by himself and said that he was going to start working on Star Wars after Knives Out was released. He said that on stage. He wasn't asked by MTV News. He volunteered that. So, for those that want to make the argument that he's saving face because he was asked the question by this MTV News reporter, no, he set it up on stage. Okay. The amount, again, of controversy, it doesn't matter what Rian Johnson says. It just kicks open the door for those that don't like The Last Jedi to try to fuel and validate their own opinions, and you are entitled to your opinion. But the one thing that I saw again this week was this lack of using that term, in my opinion. People want to state things as fact, and it's just not the case. All right, okay, so that's all I wanted to say. If you were to go to Reddit and look at the number of comments, there's 2 different posts based off of that minute 37 of Rian Johnson. And there's over 500 comments on each. It's ridiculous. More comments on that than almost the poster got for episode 9, for crying out loud. Okay, so let's go back and we'll break it down one by one. We'll start and stop, and I'll give you my comments on what Rian Johnson had to say and what I think this means for the future, and sort of my own perspective on why he said what he said. So let's go ahead and I'll start it and stop it and add a little commentary to it.
How in the loop are you on what JJ's cooked up for episode 9? Have you seen cuts or seen a script, or are you just totally out of the loop?
No, I've had a couple conversations with him, but I've actually really enjoyed kind of sitting back, waiting to get my popcorn opening day and see how the thing turns out. I cannot wait.
Okay, so let me start here. And we'll talk about it a little bit more because there's a follow-up question. And more specifically to the next comment that Rian Johnson makes about that. But people jumped at the comment of Rian Johnson not knowing what happens in episode 9 and started to say that, well, that just proves they don't have a plan. No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't prove that at all. When Rian Johnson sat down to write The Force Awakens, it was during the production of The Force Awakens, and so things could obviously change. Would Rian Johnson have been able to write The Last Jedi while The Force Awakens was still in production if he didn't already know where the character arcs were supposed to go? He also, at the time, probably didn't know exactly where the story was going to go with The Force Awakens either, because the story was changing. I absolutely believe, because I don't know how you do it otherwise, there's an outline. There is a character arc for the main characters, and probably when you just specifically look at the big three of Han, Luke, and Leia, that obviously had to change because of the tragic loss of Carrie Fisher. But when you look at the main characters, and specifically Ben Solo and Rey, nobody at this point in time, they knew where they were going in beginning, middle, and end. And I'll say this again, from my own experience of writing the stories that I'm writing right now. I did exactly the same thing. And I'm not saying that they do the same creative process that I do. I just know what worked for me. When I set out to write Embark, I honestly didn't know how I was going to do it. I had an idea for a story in my head. I was always fascinated by how script writers and novelists and storytellers, how they came up with their stories. I'm like, how do you come up with this stuff? How does that flow? And it wasn't until I sat down and started, hammering away at the keyboard that I realized that it really is, at least it was for me, and I think it is for most writers, it's just pure inspiration. You have an idea of the road that you want to travel, but the ideas just come out of you, of things that you want to do and things that you would want to read and see and what would delight you and what you would enjoy. I'm convinced that they had a beginning, middle, and end, but that the in-between stuff and how they got there was up to the individual director. And I don't necessarily like not to harp on the guy asking the questions here, but he does this thing, and a lot of guys do it, and I understand why. This interviewer is going into this interview knowing that Rian Johnson is not going to be able to fully answer the questions that he wants to ask. So he's doing kind of the wacky wall walker move of, he's throwing everything up against the wall to see which one sticks and which one he grabs onto. In doing so, he provides Rian Johnson the opportunity to say no without specifying what he's saying no to. Okay? And I don't want to wipe out too hard on this, but let me go back, because there's just 15 seconds. Let me go back to the beginning of this and give you the example.
How in the loop are you on what JJ's cooked up for episode 9? Like, have you seen cuts or seen a script, or are you just totally out of the loop?
No, I've had...
See, so have you seen a cut? Have you seen the script? Are you totally out of the loop? And then Rian Johnson just goes, no, and then he makes his comment. So he doesn't really specify which one he's referring to, and that's not that's like the first time. He does it a couple times in this interview. We'll continue here.
A couple conversations with him, but I've actually really enjoyed kind of sitting back, waiting to get my popcorn opening day and see how the thing turns out. I cannot wait.
Yeah, and why would he? Right? And I dig that about Rian Johnson. He wants to go in there and he wants to be thrilled and amazed at what J.J. Abrams puts together, and he's been working on his own thing, and there really isn't any, these individuals are not, at least my guess is, they're not like best friends. They're colleagues. They work together, and not even in the same building for the most part. So there isn't really any specific need for Rian Johnson to know the exact details of what's happening in episode 9, because he's not involved in it. I guarantee you Rian Johnson knows the arc of where those stories are going, or at least where they were planning on going. I guarantee you he had to know that, because there's no way he could have written The Last Jedi without knowing what it is they were going to do. At least in terms of the big story notes and beats. Okay, so let's continue with and there's one question here that really kind of drives me a little bit nuts that the guy asked, but we'll play more here.
If he retcons the lineage of Rey's parents, would that bother you at all, or? Okay,
let me stop there. I'm gonna give the guy a pass. I don't know how big of a Star Wars fan he is, or if he realizes how much of a trigger word. Hate using that term, but I'm going to use it anyways. Not rad. How much of a trigger word that retconning is. But it wouldn't be, at least in my opinion, it's not necessarily retconning. That's still kind of an open question. Right? It still is. And Rian Johnson's already said that. He's already said that's flexible, what he laid out. Sure, that's what we currently know of the scene on the Supremacy between Ben and Rey. That's what we currently know of Rey's lineage, was that moment in time. I would not personally call it retconning if for some reason J.J. Abrams were to turn that on its head and make it a point of view situation. So I get why the interviewer did that, and I'm really nitpicking here, okay? I get why he said that, but I kind of felt that was a bit unfair. It's like saying that Rian Johnson retconned what J.J. Abrams did with The Force Awakens by making all these changes. And I highlighted this a long time ago when The Last Jedi came out. I made a whole joke about how I wonder if J.J. Abrams was mad watching The Last Jedi because Rian Johnson was slowly undoing all the things that he did with the mask and Snoke and... I'm sure JJ was fine with it, but there was a lot of very key things that JJ did that Rian Johnson chose to subvert expectations, to turn the movie on its head, to do something completely unexpected. And it's one of the reasons why I love The Last Jedi so much. All right, I'm going to write that down because I want to get back to that point. All right, so here's Rian Johnson's response to the retconning of Rey.
Whatever he wants to do is fine by you.
Yeah, I like I said, man, I want to let go of all my expectations. I want to sit back I want to be entertained. I want to be surprised. I want to be thrilled. I want him to do stuff that I wasn't expecting him to do and just go along for the ride. For me, that's why I go to the movies, you know?
Rian Johnson's got a crutch. So this is a thing in the radio industry where oftentimes it's referred to as something that gets repeated over and over again. It's just sort of a speech pattern. I've got a bunch of crutches. I don't want to point them out because if I point them out, then you'll never be able to unhear them. If you're an avid listener to the show, you can point them out, but it's just how I talk, and I'm never gonna change. Maybe it's not a crutch. Maybe it's more of a tell is a better way to word it. Rian Johnson says, man. I do man a lot too, right? Oh, thanks, man. Usually I do that when I'm kind of uncomfortable and I'm trying to be... folksy is not the right word. I'm trying to be friendly. I'm trying to be inviting. I'm trying to connect with somebody, but I'm kind of uncomfortable about the particular situation. I do that when I meet listeners to the weekly radio show that I do, and if they come up and say, "Hey, I really like the show," I'll just be like, "Hey, thanks, man." I try to be humble about that because I'm not exactly used to that. Rian Johnson does that too. No, man, I just, you can tell that he knows that he contractually cannot go and say anything else. And he also knows that question's kind of unfair, right? What's Rian Johnson supposed to say in that moment? No, I'd be totally upset if it turns out that it's Rey Skywalker after what I did in the Last Jedi. Rian Johnson would be such a hypocrite if he got mad at what J.J. Abrams did in Episode 9. And I don't think that Rian Johnson cares. So I kind of felt that was a bit of an unfair question by the interviewer to talk about retconning Rey, when the reality was it still hasn't been completely 100% established that is indeed the situation with her parents, that she is a Rey, Rey nobody.
Are you still working on your own Star Wars project? Where does that stand?
Yeah. I'm still working on it. Yeah. I'm excited about it.
Any timeline? Have you submitted any story, script, anything?
No, we're just working ahead on it, and they're figuring out slate-wise how it's all going to lay out, and they're working that up, and I'm just chugging away on it, and I can't wait to get back into it.
I'm just curious again from a...
Okay, so that was taken. That comment there, I heard, and actually I got into an unnecessary commentary thread, war of words with somebody over that particular comment of people saying that because Rian Johnson hadn't submitted any ideas that this was going to be a first look situation and they could still not do it depending on what Rian Johnson delivers, and don't count on Rian Johnson's trilogy, and it's not going to happen for 10 years. And it's like, oh my gosh, you people are reading. I mean, like, I read a lot into stuff. You're reading a lot into that little comment. That again was he can't say right now. That's not, you're talking to an MTV News reporter at an event promoting another film. He can't go and give away everything. Yeah, I've totally submitted an idea to Kathleen Kennedy, and she loves it, and you should go and talk to her. No, man, you've got to be politically correct in that regard and be like, no, I'm sure that Kathleen Kennedy and Bob Iger already know the highlight, the specific of time, place, and a rough idea, or at least let me put it this way: they probably know a rough outline of what Rian Johnson wants to create. Has he submitted anything to them? No, probably not. Why do that now? They're working on Episode 9. Are they trusting him that he's going to put together something good? Sure. Can it change? Absolutely. Does it mean that it's not going to happen? That's possible down the line. But for people to go and say, oh, look, he hasn't submitted anything yet. And again, it just seems to be so many people want to try to reinforce their negative opinion of Rian Johnson. And that's on you, but I don't know how you go through life, man. It's too short, and I love Star Wars. And again, for me in an interview like that, and I've mentioned this before, if I'm going to have an opportunity to have a couple of minutes with Rian Johnson, I want to know about the experience. I want to ask him about Star Wars, but what he likes specifically, what his favorite things are that have nothing to do with what he's going to create, because that, to me, is how you go and you get the information about what he potentially could do. Right? And again, I'm not trying to harp on this interviewer. He's got a job to do, and I'm sure that if he were to ask a more nuanced question like that, his bosses would probably get upset at him. Why didn't you ask him specifically about the new Star Wars trilogy? I get that. But the truth is, if you really wanted to find out what Rian Johnson was going to do, or at least get a glimpse, or actually wanted to get some valuable information, ask him what he loves about Star Wars. What's his favorite Star Wars movie? I would have taken the moment. This is what I would have done. Hey, man, I know you can't talk about your new trilogy. It's still on, right? Yeah, it's still on. Great. Look, the prequel movies. Which one is your favorite prequel? Do you have a favorite one? Or your favorite moment in the prequel trilogy? Or what's one thing that George Lucas did that you really connects you to Star Wars? That's what I would personally want to know, right? And I guess that's probably where my frustration lies in interviews like this, because I can do well, that's not how I would have done it. But that's also not fair either. All right, he does have some comments to make in regards to Benioff and Weiss and the future of Star Wars, and then I'll wrap up my commentary on this, and we'll move forward in the show this week.
Fan perspective, there's talk of Benioff and Weiss doing something. There are rumors of Knights of the Old Republic. There's the Obi-Wan spinoff, etc. Just as a fan, what would you be most excited to see?
I'm psyched about all of it, but for me, I'm friends with Dan and David, and for example, to see two people like them just be given the reins to go out and show us what Star Wars is to them, you know what I mean? And I don't know. I'm also psyched about the things that are going to explore beyond what we've seen already. To me, that's kind of the most exciting stuff, is pushing the limits of seeing stuff that we haven't seen before in Star Wars, and so it's exciting.
All right, I love me some Rian Johnson. I really, really do. I dig this guy, man. I love his attitude, and that was a great answer to that question too. And I also think it's way more revealing than anybody is picking up on. Okay, so let's go back to Rian Johnson real quick and the question of what J.J. Abrams is going to do with Episode 9 and how Rian Johnson wants to feel going into that movie. This is why I love The Last Jedi. One of the many reasons why. We talk so often about subverting expectations, okay? What The Last Jedi did, in my opinion, was you walk out of a movie, and I'll give you a perfect example. You walk out of a movie, and I do this often, and it's gotten worse since I started writing my own stories, but I walk out of a movie that I was kind of like, meh about, and I start running through, well, it would have been interesting for me if they had done this, or it would have been interesting for me if they had done this. Okay. I do that less with Star Wars because, as I've mentioned before, I treat the content kind of as historical documents. Whatever the content creators make, whether I like it or not, that's what happened. So I don't personally spend a lot of time sort of going, well, that's not how I would have done it. So when it comes to Star Wars, I don't do that as often. What I love about The Last Jedi is The Last Jedi did it for me. The Last Jedi did the what-if scenario and then played it out by subverting those expectations. And I again, not to spend too much time down this path because we spend a lot of time on it when it comes to the controversy of The Last Jedi, but I do believe that's a big reason why. The expected thing would be, Master Luke Skywalker Jedi Knight. The expected thing would have been to be that throne room scene on the Supremacy would have been more reminiscent with the bad Kylo Ren and not killing Snoke off, and he remains the big bad going into Episode 9. The expected thing would have been for Kylo Ren to keep the mask on and not destroy it. The expected thing would have been for Rose and Finn with DJ to have been successful when they got on the Supremacy in order for the Resistance to escape. Okay? But that's not what he did. He did subvert expectations. He did do the what-if scenario, and I love the movie for that. I think it's the saving Finn at the end. Now, sure, if people want to argue that he did it too much, that he subverted all the expectations, that's fine. If that's your opinion, that's cool. I love it for that because it took such a risk. And it did what I do so often. We went and saw Shazam this week, and it was kind of meh. I had high expectations for it, and it looked really funny. And all the stuff with Zachary Levi I thought was great, but there was a lot of ancillary stuff circling around the Zachary Levi character and his foster brother. I'm sorry if you just heard that. My dog Bella was getting up and may need to get out here in a moment. It's funny. I stopped talking about Star Wars during the podcast, and I start mentioning another movie, and my dog Bella gets up to walk out. She's like, dude, why aren't you talking about Star Wars, man? I'm out of here. Peace out. My name's Paul. It's between y'all. But I walked out of Shazam going, oh, I kind of wish they would have done this, and I kind of wish they would have done that. But the reality is that's what The Last Jedi did for me. It subverted my expectations, and it did all the what-ifs that normally you don't get. You know, and Rian Johnson committed to that. And I appreciate the movie for that. And I think that the Star Wars movies moving forward are all going to benefit from what Rian Johnson did. I don't know if this was part of the plan. If it was, genius on Kathleen Kennedy's part for putting Rian Johnson in the place to do this middle movie, knowing that it might be controversial. But he really did pave the way to allow a filmmaker like J.J. Abrams to go into Episode 9 and maybe do some things that are unexpected. But because there were so many unexpected things that happened in The Last Jedi, the fandom will be more readily prepared to go and accept those differences than they would have been if J.J. Abrams if Rian Johnson had done more of a straightforward, expected sequel to The Force Awakens, and then we got to J.J. Abrams' movie, and suddenly he goes and turns things on its head and does some unexpected things that the fandom might have freaked out about. Rian Johnson's already taken care of that. Now, to that, let me go back to something in regards to Benioff and Weiss and what Rian Johnson said about those movies. I thought that Rian Johnson's comment about wanting to see what the Game of Thrones guys were going to do, and specifically what Star Wars means to them. And as a matter of fact, let me go back to the audio and see if I can't. I'm going to try to cue it up. I'm going to try to guess cue it up to where he made that comment. So I may not have nailed this, but let's see if I landed on it.
There's the Obi-Wan spinoff, etc. Just as a fan,
Hey,
what would you be most excited to see?
I'm psyched about all of it, but for me, I'm friends with Dan and David, and for example, to see two people like them just be given the reins to go out and show us what Star Wars is to them, you know what I mean? And I don't know. I'm also psyched about the things that are going to explore beyond what we've seen already. To me, that's kind of the most exciting stuff, is pushing the limits of seeing stuff that we haven't seen before in Star Wars, and so it's exciting.
So it was the comment of what Star Wars means to them. This is my guess. Okay, and then we'll switch topics. I want to get back to Luke and Return of the Jedi. There's a few There's a few things I want to add before we move forward and get into some of the episode 9 stuff and listener feedback. But what it means to them, I wonder if when it comes to the Benioff and Weiss movies and when it comes to the J.J. Abrams movies, I wonder if Disney and Lucasfilm, or let's just say Lucasfilm, I can always do those two. I wonder if Lucasfilm and Kathleen Kennedy, I wonder if they already had an idea that, hey, we want to at some point do, and we'll go with the rumor that the Benioff and Weiss films are going to be well before the Phantom Menace, right? More Old Republic stuff. I wonder if the plan was, hey, we want to do some movies that take place in the Old Republic, and we'll eventually find some directors to attach to that. And if they said, hey, once we're done with the sequel trilogy, we want to do another series of movies further in the timeline in a place we haven't seen yet to start something brand new and fresh, and we'll find a director that we can attach to that. And then it ended up being those are the directors that they attached to their existing ideas without having specific stories in place. Rather than, hey, Benioff and Weiss want to do a series of movies. What do you guys want to do? Hey, that sounds great. Go do that. Hey, we want to do more movies with Rian Johnson. Rian Johnson, what's your idea? I wonder if it was more the story group had, hey, these are places that we want to explore because there's marketing involved here. I mean, these things aren't happening on a whim, at least not in my opinion. There's marketing involved here and what they think is going to be marketable and what they want the future of the films to be. I see the Benioff and Weiss guys, right, doing an original series of movies set in the old trilogy that's going to establish a whole new set of sort of in-universe ground rules the way that we got in the original trilogy. They're going to handle the past, and Rian Johnson's going to be the George Lucas of the future. And I think that was the intent all along, while Disney and Lucasfilm continue to play in the middle ground of the existing movies, if that makes sense. What I don't know is what the timeline's going to be, and everybody keeps speculating on that. Both of these films have been announced, right? The announcements for the Benioff and Weiss movies and the Rian Johnson movies, they have exactly the same announcements. The ones that were hosted by Andy Gutierrez and I watched the videos the other day because I grabbed the links because I wanted to show them to somebody else who was arguing this point that Rian Johnson's films wouldn't be made for another decade or whatever. And I was like, look, man, we're all just guessing here. And here's my proof. The only official information that we have of either of those films are those two announcements and those two press releases. Beyond that, everything else is just pure speculation and rumor. I think things are planned out way more than people give Lucasfilm credit. And I'm not going to, it drives me, I'm not going to lie. I don't lie. But it drives me nuts when I'm on Twitter and people say, Disney's a dumpster fire. It's like, they're a dumpster fire because that's what you want to believe. I don't believe they actually are a dumpster fire. I think Lucasfilm knows way more, and they've got things planned out way more than people expect. Sure, things don't always go right. Solo. I also think that Bob Iger was key to go and point out that was his fault. If Lucasfilm had done what they wanted to do, Solo would have been a bigger success. All right, I'm kind of all over the map. Let's go ahead and let's get back to the show at to the show at hand.
I've seen this raw strength only once before. It didn't scare me enough then. It does now.
So this is a comment that I wanted to make when we were talking about the differences and the frustration with The Last Jedi and Luke Skywalker and watching Return of the Jedi. My own view of Luke Skywalker and why I was fine with his portrayal in the sequel trilogy was reinforced for me personally by watching Return of the Jedi yesterday. People wanted to see, and people have said this, they wanted to see a grand, Master Jedi Luke Skywalker. And they didn't get that. And they didn't like the way that Rian Johnson handled the character. I watched Return of the Jedi, and I got that guy in Return of the Jedi. You got him from the moment that he shows up at Jabba's palace when he's using his Force powers. And he's forcing away the Gamorrean guards, right? And rescuing Han Solo, and he becomes a Jedi by the end of the movie. We got that grandiose Luke Skywalker. And that movie is really powerful from Luke's perspective because of it. And again, subverting expectations. If we had gotten an all-powerful Master Jedi Luke Skywalker yanking down Star Destroyers from the sky, I've argued this point before. For me personally, that would have really stripped away how powerful things were for Luke Skywalker and how powerful Return of the Jedi was for that story arc. And there's something to be said, too, and this is just from my perspective, but there's something to be said, too, about the way that movies are made and the technology. I love the way that Luke Skywalker was handled in The Last Jedi because, to me, it is a natural progression of where that individual could have gone based off the circumstances. But Rian Johnson did something really spectacular by having Luke be that all-powerful Jedi Master at the end of that film by doing this spectacular feat that cost him his life without diminishing the power that he showed in Return of the Jedi. And that, to me, was a masterstroke. Because if you had seen Luke Skywalker, throwing Force lightning bolts and yanking Star Destroyers out of the sky and blah, 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 there's a potential there that it would have really made Return of the Jedi look archaic and antiquated. And it would have dated that film more so than it already is. Now, I don't know if that was the case. I doubt that Rian Johnson thought that deep. But I know for me, just as a fan and watching, that's what makes that moment, because that moment in The Last Jedi is so incredibly powerful when he squares off against Kylo Ren. And again, subverting the expectations, becoming what a Jedi Master really is. Knowledge and defense, never for attack. And that's what he uses his power for, and ultimately makes himself even more powerful. I'll become more powerful than you can possibly imagine. That's what Obi-Wan said. It's not going to be any different for Luke Skywalker. And when you go and you watch Return of the Jedi, all of his Force moves carry just as much weight and significance. And it even enhances it knowing that that guy right here that I'm watching, that's still finding his way, that still has to go in and square off against his father, that guy is going to pull this power move, even though he's a flawed individual, because we all are. And it is such a, it's such a good diversion and comparison or juxtaposition to the superhero phenomenon that we have, where you have these villains and these superheroes that seem just, indestructible. All right, there's no fun in that. I'm really curious what they end up doing in Endgame, and how they deal with Thanos and how they take him down to give it weight. Because right now you kind of think that Thanos is all powerful and can't be stopped, and I won't deviate off onto the Marvel MCU. I just using it as an example. I like characters like Iron Man because he is flawed. I like the Nolan Batman trilogy. I dig that for what they did with Batman because he's a flawed character. He is human because he's human. We're talking about Star Wars and it's fantasy and Jedis and midichlorians and the Force and all that kind of stuff, but Rian Johnson was still able to ground Luke Skywalker and still make him a flawed individual. And I still can't believe that after, what is it, a year and a half now? How long has it been now since that movie came out? And people are still complaining about it. It's unbelievable. All right, one more quick point on Return of the Jedi and TFA. And then we'll do a little bit of Episode 9 spoilery stuff, talk a little bit about the 3 trilogies, and then we'll get into all the listener feedback along with my plans for Celebration this week. Well, watching Return of the Jedi was really interesting because sitting down and watching it, and I'm going to keep beating this drum. Put your technology aside. Put your phone away, put your iPad away. If you do that and just watch the film like you're in the theater, like they were meant to be viewed. Because for me, it's been ruining the experiences of watching movies if I have my phone next to me. But I didn't realize until watching Return of the Jedi yesterday just how closely visually aligned that movie was to The Force Awakens. Like, it actually, despite being made, 1980s versus 2000s, those movies actually aesthetically really flow nicely into one another. The way that they're shot and sort of their simplicity. And I'll talk about this when I talk about the three trilogies and my thoughts on the vibe of the three trilogies. It does make me wonder how J.J. Abrams, and has me more curious how J.J. Abrams is going to handle Episode 9 and how it's aesthetically going to end up looking. The original trilogy, they're fairly simple, straightforward films. You get into the prequels, and they get grand in scope in what George Lucas was able to do. He had the technology readily available that he was able to really expand on this universe and really flesh out all of these amazing, wonderful ideas that he couldn't do before. And you get to the sequel trilogy, and J.J. Abrams brings it back down to earth and crafts a simpler story. Watched an amazing video. Oh, was it E.C. Henry? I think that's who he is on YouTube. If it's not, then I got that wrong. But I just found his page as of late and really, really enjoyed. He put some really interesting vehicle videos out there and short clips and his thoughts about the films. But he put together this really great clip and how The Force Awakens was really sort of a combination of the whole trilogy. And he broke it all down and the elements that J.J. Abrams used. And I don't know if J.J. Abrams specifically set out to do that, but it certainly rang true, where he kind of pulled from all these different places and the acts of the acts of the original trilogy and how they fit into the 3-act structure of The Force Awakens. It was really, really fascinating. Rian Johnson also kept it simple, but broadened the scope a bit, and that's what I've grown to love about the Canto Bight sequence, because to me it really is hearkening back to the prequels and the ability to create this new destination and to use the technology to give us a casino, Las Vegas, Monte Carlo-esque vision in Star Wars that we really hadn't seen before, that had a lot of aesthetics that related to the prequels. That has my mind racing on what J.J. Abrams is going to do with episode 9. Again, for me, the prequels have an almost romantic element to them. When you get into Attack of the Clones, for good or bad, regardless of how you feel about it, they do, for me personally, my opinion, of, Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith, there is this sort of romantic element to it with Anakin and Padme, obviously, and where Anakin is going in his turn to the dark side, and how Padme goes and is and how she relates to that, and his falling for her and her falling for him. They are very grand in scale. They are very epic films. You get into the original trilogy, and not necessarily by design, more because of limitations, I think, you get these very personal films. George Lucas wants to tell these stories of the hero's journey. He's limited in the technology, so he's going to push it as much as he can without ruining how the film feels because of his limit of technology. You get into The Empire Strikes Back, and he's made comments like about Yoda, and he wants to do the Yoda character, but this can ruin the whole thing. And, he was right about that. When you go back to The Phantom Menace, the controversy surrounding Jar Jar Binks, if Yoda had been perceived the way that some people had looked at Jar Jar Binks, it would have ruined The Empire Strikes Back. But thankfully for George Lucas, it ended up working. But he expands it a little bit further. We get to see Cloud City, which is kind of a mini version of what we ended up getting with Coruscant later on. And then you get in Return of the Jedi. We still have this very personal story of these groups of individuals and fathers and sons and this empire, right? But by the end of it, with the special editions, we do get the addition of those places that we went to earlier in the films. And you're going to Coruscant and going back to Naboo at the end of Return to the Jedi. Then you get to the sequel trilogy, which is trying to kind of bring back that original trilogy aesthetic. And I won't repeat everything I just said, but you can kind of take my commentary about the relationship between Rian Johnson's film and Canto Bight and the prequel trilogy. And then you get into episode 9, and this is where the big question mark is for me. Is J.J. Abrams going to treat aesthetically episode 9 more like Return of the Jedi, where it's more of a singular, simple story, or, as it sounds like, is this movie really going to be grand in scope, more like the prequels? So is episode 9 going to be the prequel equivalent in the sequel trilogy of the grandiose scope that we got in that prequel trilogy, right? Is it going to be the sequel equivalent to what we got in the prequel trilogy with, at its core, these personal stories? MakingStarWars.net and Jason Ward said that he apparently got the page count for the script, and that it was the longest script for any Star Wars movie. And this is surprising to me because I've always been of the opinion that there isn't a ton that JJ needs to wrap up. I know people say that, but really it couldn't be, and I spent some time talking about this on a previous episode, it really could be a direct sequel to The Force Awakens based off of what happened in the Last Jedi. But knowing some of the leaks, which I'll talk about here in just a second, of what we're thinking happens in episode 9, I'm beginning to think that episode 9 is going to be a very grand scale film, and that J.J. Abrams is going to end up pulling in some stuff from the prequel trilogy to really make this finale to the Skywalker saga bigger than any of us could have ever imagined. All right, so let's talk a little bit about leaks, a couple of things, and then we'll get into my celebration plans for the week, and I'm already going long, and we'll get into all your listener feedback.
The hyperdrive is leaking.
Okay, so there's been a... boy, that is like the weakest transition, right, to go to ever. Right?
The hyperdrive is leaking.
Like, it sounded so much better in my head when I originally went to grab that piece of audio. This will be great. I'll have this great little transition, it'll be like this.
We are the spark.
See, this is cool.
Light the fire.
Yeah.
That'll burn the First Order.
That's right. Sell it, Poe. That's rad. Then you get this.
The hyperdrive is leaking.
Kind of falls flat. Anyways. So, there's still all this conversation and discussion, and my apologies for coughing in your ear. There still is all this controversy around C-3PO in that poster, and the bandolier, and the bowcaster, and Rey's staff, and I went off and I talked about that last week. Okay, here's some additional things that have been put out there. The speculation is that for whatever reason, our heroes end up going to some snow planet. And on that snow planet, they find a droid factory. This may begin to lead to this MacGuffin that evolves throughout the film. Apparently, according to the rumors, on this snow planet is also where they meet Zori, played by Kerry Russell, we believe, which is the bounty hunter that we saw in the purple and gold in the leaked poster. And that C-3PO with those items may relate to that in some way, shape, or form. And there's some talk because in some of the ancillary content, C-3PO has developed like this droid spy network apparently, and so this may be a part of that. So this is where my mind went on this. Is some people have been extrapolating that what if we ended up getting a prequel situation with battle droids being reconstituted to go up against clone troopers. I love this idea. I don't know how you get there, and certainly a longer film would benefit from that if the script is as long as we're hearing. But this idea that potentially the Resistance is needing forces to help push back against the First Order, and these new Red Troopers that Kylo Ren has, and the potential that they could be clones, like we mentioned last week. I love this idea that we get this callback of battle droids versus clone troopers in some way, shape, or form. And again, I'll be happy with whatever they do, but I think that's a really fun, interesting idea. It would be amazing for this fan if J.J. Abrams were to pull something that significant from the prequel trilogy. Like, even if those Red Troopers in the poster end up being clones, to bring everything full circle, to tie in that aesthetic. It's similar to my idea of bringing in a bunch of other ships that we've seen. N1 Naboo starfighters. We already see Y-Wings in this particular poster, but to see old Revenge of the Sith style Jedi starfighters, to see the wedge-shaped Jedi starfighters from the prequels involved and engaged in some big battle at the end of this movie would just be absolutely amazing. Let me put it this way. What if JJ, just throw it out there. What a big what if. What if JJ Abrams is crafting this final movie in potentially the same way he did The Force Awakens? The Force Awakens was going to be this nod and echo to the original trilogy by combining elements of all three movies, A New Hope, Empire Strikes Back, and Return of the Jedi, into one movie that's not on the nose, right, but has enough nods and sort of vibes and elements and story beats to where you're familiarized with all these things going on because you've seen them in different ways before, like poetry, it rhymes. What if J.J. Abrams takes Episode 9 and does that same thing, but he does it with all the movies? And he treats Episode 9 and pulls from things like going to a droid factory. We'll get a nod to Attack of the Clones. We get a clone army garrison. We get a nod to Revenge of the Sith. We end up with this standoff between Rey and Kylo Ren, and potentially another element out there that in the middle of the final confrontation that will take place at some point between Kylo Ren and Rey. I think everybody agrees they're going to face off in some way, shape, or form, whether it's in the middle of the film or the end of the film. Those two are going to clash lightsabers at some point in time. That to me could be amazing and could be the reason why this script is so long, if that indeed is true. We also know that this marketplace set that apparently they made for Episode 9 is supposed to be like the biggest set they've ever made for any Star Wars film ever, from what everybody has said according to the rumor. So what if J.J. Abrams wraps up Episode 9 with what we've seen in so many of the other films of these 3 different events taking place? So you look at the Phantom Menace, and you've got the attack on Theed and trying to turn off the droids, right? You've got the battle taking place in space, and then you've got the duel of the fates between Qui-Gon, Obi-Wan, and Darth Maul. And then in Return of the Jedi, you've got the throne room, you've got the ground battle on Endor, and you've got the space battle. So what if at the end of 9 we get this ground battle involving reconstituted battle droids, a little bit of what makes up of the Resistance, and then this new red clone army that Kylo Ren has grown at some point in time, along with the confrontation between the personal confrontation and the fleshing out of what happens between Ben Solo and Rey, and then on top of that we have a grandiose space battle. I'm fairly certain that that's going to be how Episode 9 ends up wrapping up. I just think it would be fantastic if he pulled in those prequel trilogy elements and brought in clones and battle droids. That would be absolutely amazing. Bold, very bold, but that would be absolutely amazing. Not to mention the fact that I would love to see what J.J. Abrams did with that technology. I would love to see what J.J. Abrams does with battle droids and CGI and how he brings a new level of excitement to a scene involving them. That would be pretty darn sweet, in my opinion.
Something inside me has always been there. But now it's awake. And I need help.
All right, we still have a ton to get to with listener feedback this week. Before we do, though, let me tell you what the plans are for Celebration. So I'm not going to Celebration. I wish I was. I went to Celebration in Anaheim. So it was back in 2015. Is that right? 2015? With my son. I was living in Arizona at the time. We had a fantastic time. We really did. Didn't end up going to any of the big panels. We ended up watching the Episode 7 panel from my father's house before we actually went out to the event. But just being there and seeing the vendors and seeing all the displays and seeing up close the props for Episode 7 was just so much fun. And for as much as I wish I was going to Celebration, especially because it's so close to where I live now in Minneapolis, I'm not that bummed out because I'm excited to be able to watch it live streamed at home, to experience it at home, and then to be able to get on the mic and share it with you. So here are my plans for next week. I'm going to be doing podcasts throughout the weekend. So Friday, after the Episode 9 panel and after the trailer is released, if there is no trailer and title, I'm pretty sure Chicago's going to burn to the ground, so I'm not necessarily worried about that. The question is just how extensive is that trailer going to be, right? I'll do a podcast on Friday after that. So let me put it this way. If you're looking for supplemental material, if you're looking for instant commentary about what's happening at Celebration, I hope to provide that for you throughout the weekend. I'll be doing a podcast on Friday and most likely Saturday and Sunday as we get more details. And then the following week, we'll do one big wrap-up and really get into, in detail, the bigger things that are revealed. I mean, we've got Mandalorian footage we're probably going to end up seeing. We've got Clone Wars cartoon returning footage we're probably going to end up seeing. Hopefully we get some announcements for some of these other future projects. We have the Jedi Fallen Order video game, and of course the big Episode 9 panel, title, trailer, and all that. So keep an eye on your feeds, however you listen to the show. And again, it'll be a celebration weekend of podcasts, and I'll be releasing various podcasts throughout the weekend. Because that's what I would want. I want to be able to hear the instant commentary and not have to wait. So I hope to have them quickly turned around. So do me a favor and keep that in mind going into the weekend so that you can kind of ahead of time send me your thoughts as you see this stuff. And feel free to use this episode to comment on. If you're used to commenting on YouTube, use this particular episode as we get into Friday. And if you want to send me your thoughts on the trailer before I go and do the podcast, then get right on it after the trailer drops and either drop me an email at talkshownerd@gmail.com or comment on this week's episode, and I'll share your thoughts on the podcast as I do them throughout the weekend. There may be more depending on if we get more information, but just expect there's going to be multiple shows next week in the absence of one regular big show, and then the following week we will do that other regular big show as normal. Okay, so that's my plans for Celebration Week, and I'm super excited to be able to do that. I'm basically just going to go ahead and leave my microphone and my podcasting set up throughout the weekend so I can come in, bang out a new podcast, and send that out to you, and hopefully also share back and forth via your comments as well.
I need someone to show me my place in all this.
And that's you guys, because you give me listener feedback every single week, and I can't tell you how much I appreciate it. You can email me, talkshownerd@gmail.com. You can tweet at me at @MyNerdWorld on Twitter. You can use my regular one too, Jon Justice. I'm there as well. But MyNerdWorld is the one on Twitter that I use for the podcast mostly. And of course, leave a comment on YouTube. I grab them from there as well. And for this week, here's the deal. I've got a couple of copies of my science fiction space opera novel, Embark. In case you hadn't heard about it. Available on Amazon.com right now. You can get the ebook for $2.99, the paperback for $13.99, and the audiobook narrated by me, almost 12 hours long, for varying prices depending on whether or not you purchase one of the other versions. You can knock the price down and even get a free version if you try the Audible subscription. I want to give away an autographed copy. None of these are signed yet, so I'll personalize it, whatever you want to write. And I'm going to make it real easy. For those of you that write into me, if you want to be in the drawing for the book, just tell me, hey, man, I'd love an autographed copy of your book. And next week for the reaction show, the reaction podcast for Episode 9, the trailer and title, I will pick a random name out, and I will autograph that book, and I will mail it to you free of charge. So just drop me an email, and even if you don't want to comment on the show itself and you just want to say, hey, I want to be in the drawing, you can do that as well. Talkshownerd@gmail.com, or put it in your comment on YouTube, or tweet at me, and I will add all your names onto the list, and I will pick one randomly, and you will win an autographed copy of the paperback version of Embark. Embark, Treasure in Darkness is currently in its editing phase right now. I hope to have it out sometime in June. Cannot wait to get that book out there. I'm going through the first full read-through and line-by-line edit, and I'm really excited for you guys to hear this, to read this new story and hear this new story with the audiobook as well. It really turned out better than I could have imagined, and it's a lot of fun. If you liked Embark, I really think you're gonna love Treasure in Darkness. And if you haven't read Embark yet, stop the podcast, go to Amazon, and get it right now. Just search for Jon Justice and Embark, and you'll find it there. All right, let's get to the listener feedback this week. Stephanie S. writes this. When it comes to C-3PO holding the bowcaster, people have said it's Chewie's, but I don't think it is. It's hard to see, but Chewie is holding his bowcaster in the poster. But because of the poster, there are people who think Chewie will die. I don't think so. It's just bringing out the sequel trilogy haters who have already went to Rotten Tomatoes to slam Episode 9 pretty sad. Yeah, I saw that. First off, thank you for the comment. I'm going to say that I still think it's Chewie's bowcaster, even though he's holding it in that poster. Simply because those images could be from two different times in the movie, and I don't think we've seen anybody else with a bowcaster. I do know that Rotten Tomatoes has already changed the way that they allow people to comment early on a film that hasn't been released yet. And I hate the fact that we give no offense to Rotten Tomatoes, but I hate how much importance we put on Rotten Tomatoes at all. And Twitter comments and all that. Like, if you strip all that away, it's like there's so little negativity out there. If you get rid of the social networking and the ability that people have to anonymously put out their ridiculous comments. Anyways, all right. Sheep Cow says this. Thank you for your great podcast. Thank you, Sheep. I appreciate that. It was rad. Please keep using this word. It needs to come back. I don't think the title is Skywalkers, in reference to last week's leak. It makes sense for the context of the other 8 films, but I feel like that would be the title of the whole saga rather than the last movie. Yeah, I could see that. I think you talked about this previously. Disney is going to make more trilogies. That's a given. They will possibly make more sagas. This saga is the Skywalker saga. I think the title of the movie will be slightly more specific to the story of 9. I also think that if Disney goes with a one-word title, then they would further alienate a lot of fans. Right now, Disney is trying to bring back fans into the fold after the failure, doing that thing with my fingers, among a lot of hardcore fans of The Last Jedi, but I don't know. I'm down if the title is, in fact, Skywalkers. We are all going to watch the movie anyways. Also, I love your George Lucas impression. Oh, thank you so much, Sheep Cow. Have a great day, and may the Force be with you. Yeah, I tend to agree with you. I'll say this in regards to the title. If it's not Skywalkers or any of the other ones that are leaked, I'm going to go out on a limb and say that no Star Wars movie title will ever be leaked prior to its official release. If there was ever a Star Wars title that was going to get leaked, it's Episode 9's. And the fact that we are less than a week away from getting the title, unless it is Episode 9, tells me that Disney and Lucasfilm have figured out how to keep the title secret. And honestly, I know that I said I liked Skywalkers, and I think that it works. I do agree. I do think the title is probably going to be something more specific and something we have not heard yet. When we find out on Friday. All right, Colleen Falk writes this. I feel that C-3PO hasn't gotten the respect he deserves over the movies. I especially didn't like Poe's interaction with him at The Last Jedi at the end. A dark Dameron moment. I think the girls with sabers would agree. Maybe wielding a bowcaster is a sign of giving more respect to his character and his developing courage he lacked of the other movies. Maybe he'll show his courage when it's needed most in the all-out war this movie is supposed to have. This, too, would be rad for me. Okay, I appreciate the comment, Colleen. I am going to respectfully disagree in regards to Poe Dameron. Not that he treated C-3PO poorly in The Last Jedi. Okay, I agree with that. What I would add is C-3PO has always been treated poorly. I mean, throughout all the movies, he's treated poorly. You know? Goldenrod, you're going to be a permanent resident. Wait. Typical. I mean, C-3PO is treated like garbage in all the films. Poe Dameron didn't do anything different than what Han Solo did to him for crying out loud. I mean, right? There was Han Solo takes his hand and shoves it on his face. You know, it'll wait. You know, never tell me the odds. Shut him up or shut him down. I know it's more, I think it's more highlighted because of the lack of time that C-3PO got in these movies. I will give Rian Johnson credit, though, because I actually think that Rian Johnson did a better job of having, well, both of them, C-3PO and R2-D2 in The Last Jedi than J.J. Abrams did. I don't want to wipe out on that. The show's already going long this week. Now it makes me want to go watch The Last Jedi again. I told myself I wasn't going to wait. I mean, I was going to wait. I'm holding off on any viewings of The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi until we get to next weekend because I know, not that I can't watch them back-to-back on weekends, but I'm trying to starve myself. I'm so weird when it comes to movies, right? I'm like, I'm going to wait. I'm not going to watch Last Jedi this weekend, even though I really, really want to. I also don't feel like getting the eye roll from my wife. Let's move on. Molly Thomas writes this. An army of Gwendolyn Christies and then 3 laughing, crying emojis. Make it happen, JJ. That was my theory from last week, that if they're clones, who are they going to be a clone of? What if they're a clone of all Huxes? They should be a clone of Snoke, and then they should have all been gold. They should have been clones of Rose to really make everybody mad. Sorry, I'm being dumb. Okay, Jamie M. writes this. Star Wars movies do have naming conventions, whether you recognize them as such or not. Disney is constantly being accused of not being authentic Star Wars. So I don't think after 2 sequel trilogy movies that follow these naming conventions quite perfectly, all of a sudden we are getting a one-word title. I like a discussion of possibilities, but I don't see a one-word title as having a 1% chance of happening, personally. Okay. If that does happen, I would dislike it most fervently and see it as a very poor decision. I appreciate your use, Jamie M. First off, I appreciate you writing in. I also appreciate your use of sort of your opinion on that. That's cool. The naming convention part of it, I am going to disagree with because I do believe that all of these films follow a naming convention simply from the view of being serial type names, right? The Phantom Menace, Attack of the Clones, Revenge of the Sith, A New Hope, The Empire Strikes Back, Return of the Jedi, The Force Awakens, The Last Jedi. Okay. People have in the past tried to look at the crawl and think that there's some sort of code. Like there's a template that you can use to make the crawl for a movie. And I don't believe that's the case. I also don't believe that that's the case when it comes to the title of any film. If it was, then The Last Jedi would have been, The Last Jedi Strikes Back or something of this nature, right? The Last Jedi doesn't follow the same convention as Attack of the Clones or The Empire Strikes Back by any stretch. I think that they just name these films what they want to name these films, which is why I think there's more than a 1% chance that it could be Skywalkers, because I don't personally believe there's anything or anybody out there within Lucasfilm or George Lucas that dictated when he sold it that you can make these movies, but you're going to follow this outline for titles. I just simply don't think that's the case. But again, that's just my opinion, and I appreciate you writing in. Misconduct 1 says this: whatever the title is, I'm happy we're getting one more movie with Rey and Ben and the whole cast. I'm a bit disappointed by the title Skywalkers. I'm happy if people like it and it turns out to be cool for them. I find it all a bit boring. I still love The Only Hope or The Last Hope. For me, that brings the saga more full circle. We begin with Leia stating, "Help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi, you're my only hope." It would be poetic to end with, "Help me, Ben Solo, you're our only hope," or "You're the last hope." But what do I know? I'm just a fan, not a writer. If it's Skywalker, then so be it. Life goes on. A rose by any other name smells as sweet, right? You're absolutely Misconduct, friend of the show. Thank you very much. I still like Return of the Clones or Revenge of the Clones. I would be giddy if J.J. Abrams went full prequels. Can you imagine the fandom if it turned out that after all this in-depth conversation, analysis, Reylo, Bendemption, thousands upon thousands of hours of podcasts and hundreds of hours discussing what a potential title could be and the in-depth breaking down of the mythology and all of this, if J.J. Abrams throws caution to the wind and pulls out a pulpy title because Kylo Ren made a clone army and it's Return of the Clones, that would be amazing. I'd be so happy. I don't think it's got a snowball's chance on Hoth of happening, but I think that would be amazing. All right. Agnes Winar writes this. Hello. 1. How can Ben be saved? Imagine, : in the finale of 9, some unspoken unknown danger cannot be destroyed by Skywalkers. It had been immunized against Skywalker's powers, but Ben says, "I am no Skywalker, I am a Solo," and bang! Destroys said danger. Smiley face. 2. Rey Kenobi, please, no. For casual fans out there, Obi-Wan was a super Jedi, no attachments, purity, and sacrifice. He sacrificed his life to protect Luke. He was supposed to be platonically in love with the Duchess of Mandalore, that's it. Faithful until the end of his days. He was a real monk. Now, if it got into sexual relationships to procreate, sounds a lot like the stereotypical filthy monks with no morale. I just don't like it. It spoils the character for me. Those are some great points. And again, thinking about it from a very pragmatic point of view, I tend to agree. Thank you for the comment. And actually, they have more to say. Hi, just wondering, I think that in Return of the Jedi, there is nobody left to tell Luke and Leia the truth about their father and mother, Anakin and Padme. So how could they ever tell the truth to Ben if they didn't know it themselves? They only know that Vader was bad and turned good in the end, right? Yeah, I tend to agree. I guess the question and sort of the explanation that could exist there would be that, did Luke have further conversations? Was he chilling out, having an Andorian beer with Force Ghost Obi-Wan Kenobi? Right? Think about that for a moment. So at the end of Return of the... Oh, here we go. I'm sorry. I apologize. We're an hour 20 in, and I've got jokes to make. This is one of those things where you don't want to think about it too far, okay? But just for the sake of argument, at the end of Return of the Jedi, and I almost don't want to ruin it for anybody because I don't want to ruin your experience of watching the movie, but this cracks me up. So at the end of Return of the Jedi, you've got Luke standing there, and you've got Anakin, Obi-Wan, and Yoda, all as Force ghosts, right? What happened after that scene? So, there they are. Luke's dad is right there. Like, they could have, like, existential conversations about the Force, and he's got all three of them. And he just smiles, hey, what's going on, bros? And walks away. I mean, what? Like, I want the camera to spin back around after Luke walks away, because the final shot of Return of the Jedi is almost as equally ridiculous. Okay, so at the end of the Phantom Menace, when you get the peace, and Mr. guy, right? Okay, they're all in front of a big crowd of people. Right, you got the whole group there, and they're all doing the celebration. Same thing at the end of A New Hope. At the end of Return of the Jedi, you've got our group of heroes that are standing there, all cheered, right, clapping along with to Yub Nub, depending on what version you're watching, right? Who are they performing for? Are there a bunch of Ewoks that are sitting there in front of them? But what I want to see is when Luke walks away and we see the Force ghosts there, I want the camera to spin back around to Anakin, Obi-Wan, and Yoda to have them all looking at each other going, well, now what? What are we... That's cool. I guess we'll Force ghost our way out of here? I'm sorry, I apologize if I ruined it for you. That makes me laugh. It's like, hey, Luke, you got questions? Dude, I'm right here. Check it out. Look at this. Look, you don't even want to ask me how I got the robes? Like Anakin Skywalker, right? How'd I get the robes? Where'd the robes come from? I didn't have... I'm sorry. Okay, let's get back to the listener feedback this week. Baffled and Deranged writes this. I'm looking forward to seeing the loose threads getting tied up in Episode 9. Just thinking about everything that has taken place in all the Star Wars movies from 77 till now is so dizzying at times for my 68-year-old brain, LOL. I love your podcast and explanation of past, present, and future movies. Thank you. I'm a very big Reylo shipper. Nice. Thank you so much for the comment. I really, really do appreciate it. Carrie writes this. Rad all the way. I love your podcast, by the way. I love your theories. A cloned Palpatine would be incredible. Thank you for the comment, Carrie. Aunt Vesuvi, who's been around for a long time, friend of the show as well. Since you wondered about it, John, Chewbacca was 234 years old as of The Last Jedi, which occurred 34 ABY since he was born in 200 BBY. According to Wikipedia, Wookiees have a lifespan of over 400 years. Personally, I'm hoping we'll have many more years with him as a character, but I'll be fine with whatever they choose for the story. Thank you, Aunt Vesuvi. Tracy writes this. You have me wondering if the MacGuffin leads back to a revelation about Shmi now. Haha, yes. I'd like that. It's interesting that some leaks talked about a scene on Tatooine because it would make sense that the revelation then relates to Shmi and or Anakin Skywalker. And Tracy, I am so glad you brought that up because I often forget about that connection. And it seems so obvious, but I'm so, movie-focused that it wasn't until reading your comment that actually dawned on me. When I heard about the Tatooine connections and that the Jordan set was going to potentially be multiple locations, I think that was courtesy of MakingStarWars.net. They talked about returning to Tatooine. I had always immediately gone to the Skywalker homestead. to Luke's home, right? I hadn't thought about the fact that they could be going back because of Shmi. That I really, see? Yeah, that's good. You know what? I'm gonna hold on to that because I'm wondering if there'll be. Oh man, I hope that they open up that can of worms in the trailer somehow, because that really is. If that is a linchpin there, and I do think that is the Shmi is the gateway into connecting all these movies if they decided to go there, because she's one of the biggest question marks, at least in my opinion. When you go back to how all of this started, when you go to the original trilogy, you got Luke, okay, and his dad, but we have the prequels, and we start off with Shmi and this slave boy, and the fact that he was brought there 3 years old. So, I dig that, Tracy. Thank you. All right, Jennifer Oliver, friend of the show, writes this, and I'm going to skip to the second half. She's got a bunch of great comments here, but for the issue of time, let's go here. One thing needs to happen, talking about Bendemption, is that Rey learns some positive things about Ben, Kylo Ren, some actions that took place that shows he has his father's heart, and that he's a good guy underneath all the power and patricide. She needs to fall for him, not just the potential or idea of him changing. She needs to see that the guy she wants to be, him to be, he already is, even without her help. I hope JJ handles that well. Part of her failure, right, The Last Jedi was all about failure, right? Was thinking she would go with him and get him to be what she and the whole galaxy needed him to be. Rian Johnson did an amazing job of showing this while still showing such a strong connection. Rian Johnson is amazing. I just watched The Last Jedi again today. Can you tell? You're absolutely right, and I can't help but speculate how much of the plot line of Episode 9 is going to be what we've been talking about of this. You know, like in the title. Well, the title has something about the past in it, legacy in it, where both Kylo Ren, Ben Solo, and Rey go on this journey to find out more about these individuals, and Rey finds out more about Ben Solo and the Skywalkers themselves, while Kylo finds out more about his grandfather. I find that really, really intriguing. All right, Amy, Athea Gaia writes this. I would really like to see Phasma as the clone trooper. Not sure about Palpatine, though. Can they clone Force users? That's interesting. If they can, do they still have Force abilities? Yeah, I would think so if they're supposed to be in everybody, right? That may be too much to get into in the last movie of the sequel trilogy. True. Thanks for reading my comment about the Knights of Ren. I'm really hoping they have a big part in 9. I could see them as taking the place of the big bad in 9, a group of Force users that Ben and Rey must face off against. I could also possibly see them going with Ben when he turns, if they are loyal to him, especially if they are the former students of Luke's Jedi Academy, or maybe even some of them go with Ben and some stay with the dark side. So many possibilities. Thank you very much. Kyle Bookout writes this. Great podcast, John. Thank you, Kyle. Great name. My son's first name, my middle name. Your George Lucas impersonation is spot on. Mm-hmm. Not really feeling Skywalkers, but we'll see. 2 more weeks. Yeah, I don't think anybody really likes. I'm the only one that thought Skywalkers was kind of cool, huh? I guess so. That's cool. Amber Harris writes this. Interesting comments about Shmi Skywalker. I went back and watched Phantom Menace and thought it interesting that they moved to Tatooine when Anakin was 3. I was talking about that earlier. Where were they before then? Also, does anybody know Han Solo's last name? Solo gave us how he randomly picked Solo for his last name without giving us his name, and only a teaser that his father worked on the shipyards of Corellia but was laid off. So Solo isn't really his last name, just an alias. I agree with you that they have to do a Solo movie sequel. They just tease so much Darth Maul and can't just leave it like that. I'm not super into extra Star Wars materials, but The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi were amazing films, in my opinion. Thank you, Amber. I appreciate that. If the title is Skywalker, so be it, says Case S. I'm not jazzed about it. I've always loved the news headline type of titles, but these movies, which is somewhat reminiscent of World War II newspaper headlines, being plural, it would also spark new energy into Rey, is a Skywalker theory, which I'm quite tired of. Boy, you know what? I'm thinking it probably won't be Skywalker since almost everybody universally doesn't like it. That came from an AintItCoolNews.com website, by the way. That's where that whole idea for Skywalkers came from. Somebody said that's what it was. So, Mackenzie Cassidy writes this. Thank you so much for the rad podcast. Thank you, Mackenzie. Your name is rad. I really, truly look forward to them every week. I think a clone army of Gwendolyn Christie would be the most epic thing ever. I also believe this would bring an added measure of importance to her character. Not many people have read the Phasma book and are unaware of just how strong she really is. The Force Awakens kind of did a disservice to her, in my opinion, by having her surrender to Han and Finn so easily. Thank you very much. And again, that name is Mackenzie's rad. All right, let's go here. Arvel Kryneed? Dude, I love the clone theory for the Red Troopers. What if the Red Troopers are clones of Luke, made from his severed hand? We've heard rumors in the past that they're using revolutionary de-aging technology. An army of evil Lukes? That would be mind-blowing, especially if they can all use the Force. Yeah, so we'd have a bunch of Red clone troopers pulling Star Destroyers out of the sky. Well, I guess they wouldn't be Star Destroyers, would they? They would be whatever Resistance ships that they had. Not bombers, because Poe made sure that all those got blown up at the beginning of The Last Jedi. Love that opening scene, by the way. Oh, that opening battle scene in The Last Jedi is so amazing. Skydrathic writes this, in parentheses, this is the one and only podcast I am looking forward to every week, so thankful for your content and love of Star Wars. Thank you so much. I really do appreciate that. I really do. If you can't tell, I love doing this show. And so the fact that you wrote that just absolutely, all these comments just make my day. All right, let's see. Mackenzie's back. Rad listener feedback. I just wanted to point out everyone's sort of freaking out about the phrase end of the Skywalker saga. That Disney and Lucasfilm keep repeating. I'll admit, it even worried me a little bit at first. All I want is to not see Ben Solo die in the end. But I just realized while listening to Girls with Sabers' most recent live show was that they are saying the end of the Skywalker saga, not the end of the Skywalkers. Very true. I believe that this means they do not intend to revisit the story again and not doom Ben Solo. There is too much evidence and build up for his redemption, and I don't think we have a cause to be as worried. This also goes along with the possible title Skywalkers. Thank you again for the amazing and insightful show every week. Thank you again, Mackenzie. And to a point that I wanted to make earlier that it slipped my mind and I forgot about that, so I apologize. When looking at the three trilogies, when looking at the prequels, the original trilogy and the sequel trilogy, and if you go prequels, grandiose, epic, romantic with Anakin and Padme and George Lucas using the new technology, movie technology, to really bring all of his ideas to life. Original trilogy, limited by technology, very personal stories, hero journey, and then the sequel trilogy have a combination of both. Storytelling-wise, the sequel trilogy is unique, in my opinion, because it actually, when you look at the galaxy as a whole, has a lot more in common with the prequel trilogy than it does the original trilogy. In the original trilogy, we, especially as a kid watching, I remember this, we have a galaxy that's under already the oppressive thumb of the Empire. And the Empire is always a lingering threat in the original trilogy. And so while you have this personal story in Luke's hero's journey and that dynamic playing out and following that main A storyline, you also had this larger storyline that you had to remedy with Return of the Jedi, which is taking down the Empire, which is in control. The sequel trilogy was interesting, and certainly Resistance has helped with this, because the First Order has not been established to have total control over the galaxy. And in The Force Awakens, we see the beginnings of that. It's almost like The Force Awakens takes a nod from Revenge of the Sith in as much as this is how the First Order begins to take control of the galaxy. And in The Last Jedi, we still don't see that fleshed out yet, apart from the opening crawl where it talks about the First Order spreading in the galaxy. What I'm wondering is, will J.J. Abrams in 9, with the time jump of being a year, will we see what we've seen a little bit in Resistance already of, in the crawl, the First Order has now grabbed multiple systems and has begun its tyrannical rule under, Supreme Leader Kylo Ren. That's my expectation. the point I wanted to make was the fact that we haven't yet had this already First Order grabbing hold of the galaxy has really raised the stakes and importance of Ben Solo and Rey and remedying their conflict together, which to me really leads to Bendemption and Reylo, depending on what your definition of Reylo is. Okay. Getting back to the comments, Skydrathic had another comment. While it would be cool, I don't believe the Red Troopers are clones, because this is one of the things people make up by one-on-one taking jokes for real, because while some things the characters say are supposed to be taken literally, Star Wars fans tend to take every dumb joke literally, equals what Kylo says to Ren in 7. I think what he means to Hux. So I think what Skydrathic is trying to say there is the comment of that Kylo Ren makes to Hux of maybe we should have, maybe Snoke was right and we should go with the clone army. And that's really where everybody's drawing that from, apart from the visual representation in that poster that they look like clones with the helmet being different. Let's see. Arvel writes again, great podcast. I found you through Girls with Sabers, who also rule. Unfortunately, it took me a minute to find you, because just hearing your name phonetically, I assumed it was spelled John, John. Whoops. Anyway, I completely agree with what you're talking around the 59-minute mark regarding Kylo Ben searching for more info about Vader or even Padme. It would really be interesting to see him on Naboo, possibly visiting Padme's grave. Reason being, of course, at some point he'd discover the tremendous impact Padme had on Anakin's fall. Yep. And he would naturally be curious about Anakin's love life, because he's obviously curious about his own. That would lead into Mustafar. That would be rad. Where perhaps he'd be confronted by Anakin's ghost. That would be rad. And what if Anakin Ghost appears as a scarred and limbless Anakin, basically Vader without the suit in R1, to sort of teach Kylo a lesson about the toll the dark side has, and it's spooky, and it's super spooky, and leaves him shook. I don't think that would happen, simply because we've already seen Anakin in ghost form at the end of Return of the Jedi, and he's got all his limbs. But thank you so much for the comment, though, and I want to go back to Mustafar and Vader's castle desperately. All right, just got a few more here. Severin Weichman writes this: things that make me happy. Hashtag baby Ben in her belly. Hashtag yin to my yang. Hashtag I want to be your endgame. Hashtag I am Skywalker. I am a Skywalker like my grandfather before me. Thank you, Severin. I appreciate that. Let's see. Is this the last one? This would be the last one. Mitzi K writes this: haven't been able to listen to your podcast for a while, so I'm catching up here and there. Haven't checked the poster out closely yet, so thank you so much for the breakdown. Any significance to Rey's lightsaber being white? At least it looks white to me. I always interpreted white as being light side, but not Jedi. A more balanced Force user, so this is exciting to me. Maybe it's not white and my old eyes are seeing things, but I hope not. I'm listening while getting ready to work, so if I missed you mentioning this already, sorry. You did not miss me mentioning that, and I actually failed to mention that last time. Some people have speculated that on the poster. It looks white. I don't think it is. It is the Legacy Saber. She put it back together, so there's no reason for it to turn white. They haven't... Let me rephrase. I know we've established in canon the Kyber crystals bleed depending on where you stand with the Force. I think I'm getting that right. So there is a canon way in which the lightsaber color could change. That being said, though, I'm looking at the Force Awakens poster right now in front of me, the official poster, and most of the posters most of the lightsabers all do the same thing. They have the white center, and then they have the hue of the glowing red around it. Okay, I think the poster having the saber look like it's white is simply because of the quality of the poster. In the leaked character photos, Rey's holding the ignited saber, and it looks blue. So my opinion is still going to be blue. But I very much appreciate your comment, Mitzi, and keep them coming. All right, guys, that's it. I went long, 1 hour and 40. I hope you don't mind, and I hope you had fun listening. And that's it until next week. Oh, my gosh, the next time you hear my voice, I will be talking about, most likely, the title and trailer, and I can't tell you how excited that makes me. So, again, if you are interested in winning for free a autographed copy, personalized of my science fiction space opera Embark. Taft Guardia and the girl he loves must fight for humanity's future, with the Earth facing an industrial apocalypse and a corporate madman looking to take advantage of the disaster. That's the core story of the book. It's a lot of fun, guys. I really hope if you haven't picked it up yet, you'll go to Amazon.com, Embark, Jon Justice. Pick up the ebook, paperback, or audiobook for yourself or a friend. Like I said, the follow-up book, Embark, Treasure in Darkness, is finished and currently being edited right now and should be out in the next couple of months. So, if you want an autographed copy of the paperback, just let me know. Hey, I want to be in the drawing for the paperback. Leave it in your comments. Just leave me that comment. You don't even have to say anything about the show. Just say, hey, put me in the drawing for the book. And next week, I will pick one name at random from everybody that says they want to be in the drawing between now and then. And I will sign it however you'd like me to sign it and ship it off to you free of charge. So you can do that. TalkShowNerd@gmail.com. Leave a comment on YouTube or on Twitter as well. And Facebook if you're on Facebook. Jon Justice. At the My Nerd World or at Jon Justice. All of those places you can find me and let me know you want to be in the drawing. And again, we'll do that on next week's show. And then expect a bunch of content next week as we work through Celebrations. So I'm super excited. Can't wait. Thank you so much again for checking out this week's show. I look forward to your comments every single week. I'm sure we'll have a bunch of listener feedback and a ton of talk about next weekend. So until then, have yourself a great week. And here's a little message from Obi-Wan Kenobi to take us out.
The Force will be with you, always.
My Nerd World.